Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Couch. We're working on that series still, believe it or not, and we do hope to bring you something interesting for, very soon. But I wanted to take a moment once again to discuss, what we're looking at coming forward, a little bit about some predictions that were made in previous videos, and get a sense of what we can expect in the next few weeks. So, obviously, most of you who follow this type of thing know by now that the Iowa caucuses were nothing short of a mess. I mean, we all know that. Regardless of what your political alignment is or who you support, there's no question that there was quite a bit of chaos regarding the validity of the counts. Seeing worksheets that we saw bad math on that ultimately proved that the delegate assignments from the given caucus locations were off, and disputes about whether they could actually be corrected. So there was a lot of, contention with regards to the outcome of that caucus. And it, if anything, to Sanders supporters and perhaps others, only proved that the concept of a caucus over a primary vote is continuing to demonstrate its necessity for being relegated to the dustbin of history. Now, in a previous video, I had discussed with you guys the idea that it would be essential to continue to keep the centrist candidates divided. That in that Amy Klobuchar video, and basically the idea was, for those who haven't seen it or just want a quick recap, by keeping the candidates' support divided in the centrists amongst Buttigieg, Bloomberg, Biden, right? The three Bs and Klobuchar, it's going to continue to make it harder for any particular clear competitor to step forward and challenge considerable support that's already behind the Bernie Sanders campaign. So, based on what we're seeing so far with recent polling coming out of New Hampshire and, of course, out of the results of the Iowa caucus, it seems pretty clear that my prediction in that scenario was correct. The idea that Bernie is winning the popular vote in Iowa and is projected to win it in New Hampshire is encouraging. That alone wouldn't have been necessarily enough or very surprising, because ultimately there's still 48 more states to go after that, and there's a lot of things that can happen. However, there's some other interesting news that's been out there recently with Nate Silver, a person who's no fan of Bernie Sanders, projecting that he is going to sweep most of the states out there in this election. And that's very encouraging news, but it's something that the Sanders camp needs to be cautious to accept. We've become understandably very skeptical of media or of polling or really anything out there that tries to tell us what the outcome of a primary with a Bernie Sanders candidate is going to be. But if there's anything left that people who oppose the Sanders presidency would have the ability to sell us, it would probably be hope, because that can create complacency, and confidence and complacency often go hand in hand, right? I mean, we want to try and be careful to accept good news, just as we might be cautious or skeptical to accept bad news. So just because we're seeing the idea that he might potentially win or be receiving the majority of support in most of the states out there, that alone isn't enough. And recent events are evidence of that. In the Iowa caucus, he was expected to win by several percentage points. And in fact, he did overperform his polling numbers as we expected him to. In spite of this, and in spite of the polling numbers and accuracy and likelihood of success of the Buttigieg campaign, he dramatically over projected his performance, but not in popularity. What he really overperformed in was how the delegate math worked out. And so, even though he lost the popular vote by thousands of votes, he was able to capture multiple delegates more than Sanders did in this campaign. And what that tells us very clearly is that even a 5% lead should be considered by Sanders supporters as a 5% deficit. It can't just be a victory, it has to be a considerable victory, because there will be a lot of things working against the success and reception of delegates of the Sanders campaign. Now, I don't have any intention of spreading conspiracy theory or, raging on the internet about the fact that there, or the theory that there is open cheating happening. I am absolutely in the camp that believes that you should always ascribe to incompetence what you might, initially see as malice. And that's not an exact quote, but you get the idea. It's very easy to look at those worksheets and the math involved and say, if you didn't go to college and take math and you haven't been in high school in a long time, that those formulas could very easily result in some confusion as to what the right answers are. And even with multiple eyes on it, it could very well have resulted in a number of, unfortunate conclusions in each of those caucus sites. It is to the credit of those who see a conspiracy, it is very suspicious that every single mistake fell away from benefiting the Sanders camp and towards benefiting someone else. However, the cause or the motive or whatever you want to assign to it, the ultimate explanation for all of these different individual incidences is irrelevant. The bottom line is we have to assume going forward that there is a possibility that this type of thing will continue to happen in state after state, and therefore the only way around it is to create so much support that there can be no denying the outcome is a legitimate Bernie Sanders win. Now remember, unlike in the GOP race where there are a handful of states that have a winner-take-all policy which can create a considerable lead for someone who's already ahead of the game, none of the states in the DNC primary allow an individual candidate with a majority of the support to take all of the delegates of that given state, which means even if the Sanders campaign continues to earn victories one after the other throughout the states, another candidate like a Buttigieg or a Bloomberg could continue to trail close behind, and opportunities could exist for that candidate, whoever it might end up becoming, to ultimately be able to catch up. And that's something that we need to continue to be very wary of and aware of. Now, in a previous prediction I had also made, I don't know if it was a tweet or if I had said it somewhere in a video, but I basically had previously declared that I believed that the Sanders camp would win the Iowa caucus with no more than 3% of the vote and more likely somewhere around 1%. And I was, essentially estimating that conservatively because I anticipated a certain degree of pushback and a certain degree of gamesmanship, if you want to be courteous, from, competitive rivals and people who are well connected within that state. Now that prediction turned out to be pretty much on the money, but obviously, it didn't end up actually being enough. We can't, afford, just to reiterate, we can't afford to take victories that are 1% or 3% above the competition. They have to be well above, not just because there might be gamesmanship, not just because there might be human errors, but because there's also the issue of how these delegates are assigned at stake. The popular vote saw Hillary Clinton receive 3 million more votes than Trump, and he still lost. That same strategy exists on the state level. There is an entire system in place designed to prevent populism. And if it weren't for the ability of the Trump campaign to completely overwhelm their competition, they very likely would have fallen victim to those same circumstances. So if the Sanders campaign is going to succeed in a similar fashion, then it needs to do so with the awareness that a victory by 1%, by simple majority, is not enough. Remember, folks, complacency is our number one threat right now. We need to stay active, stay phone banking, and stay involved. If we do that, we will win. Thank you.